More now on the legal issues facing the Biden family as new details emerge about that failed plea deal for the president's son. And as a former key associate of Hunter Biden prepares for closed-door testimony tomorrow before the House Oversight Committee. Joining us now, South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who's a member of that committee. Welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you, Shannon. Thanks for having us on this morning.
Okay, so that happens tomorrow behind closed doors. The Wall Street Journal says maybe don't get too excited for fireworks. Reporting this, a person close to Archer expected him to testify that Joe Biden wasn't substantially involved in any of Hunter Biden's business dealings. Are you worried that Republicans are overhyping what you might get from Mr. Archer?
No, I don't think so. This was a person who was in business with Hunter Biden and Biden family members. He was the BFF of the president's son. He has a lot of information, I believe, that we'll be able to fact check and corroborate with other witnesses and other whistleblowers. I mean, we just had two IRS whistleblowers admitting that their investigation has been blocked by federal agencies. And is he going to tell us that Joe Biden was in the room via conference call or in person, and to what extent he was involved in this mess? And the American people have the right to know whether he was or was not.
In the meantime, the ranking member of that committee, Democrat Congressman Jamie Raskin, says Republicans are kind of playing fast and loose with the truth. He says there's an FBI agent, and he wants that transcript of that interview released because he said it actually wipes away the notion that there was any political bias in the investigation into Hunter Biden. He sent a letter to the chair, James Comer, saying this: not releasing that transcript is the latest in your troubling pattern of concealing key evidence in order to advance a false and distorted narrative about your investigation of Joe Biden that has not only failed to develop any evidence of wrongdoing by President Biden, but has, in fact, uncovered substantial evidence to the contrary. He says Republicans are now doing what they accused Democrats of doing. He says there's no there there. The accusations that Democrats were going down rabbit trails with regard to President Trump and Russia, that he says that's exactly what Republicans are actually doing now.
Well, I mean, I do believe in transparency, and all the evidence that the Oversight Committee, either for or against, should absolutely be released to the American people. They don't trust Congress because often it's a bunch of political games, so trust the evidence that comes out. But I will tell you, the evidence that we've seen is overwhelmingly piling up. Some of it we can't share because it's confidential. For example, the 170-plus suspicious activity reports pointing to money laundering, bribery, racketeering, and corruption, et cetera. So we have to go find the bank records. We have to go find witnesses and other whistleblowers to prove it in other ways, since we can't release that information. So it's really important, in my estimation, no matter what side of the aisle you are on, release everything. At the point that you can, release it all to the American people.
Well, and this is sparking conversations about impeachment, and Politico is one of the many places here in D.C. that's reporting on this schism sort of within the Republican Party. There are Republicans who are publicly expressing concerns, Congressman Ken Buck, one of them, about going down this trail. Here's what Politico says: McCarthy must placate his hard-right critics whose support he'll need in this week's high-stakes spending votes without alienating his most skittish members who face re-election on turf that Biden won. So what about this issue of impeachment? Is the party divided?
Well, I do believe we are at this point. An inquiry is different from an impeachment vote and is another tool in the toolbox. But I will tell you, every time we walk the plank, we are putting moderate members that won Biden-won districts, we are putting those seats at risk for 2024. We are putting the majority at risk. And it's not just impeachment that does that. Other issues like abortion, et cetera, also put those members on the plank. But the one thing I'll say is this, is that whatever the evidence shows us, we ought to follow the facts. And we have to be better than Nancy Pelosi. Pelosi really politicized the impeachment process. We do not want to do that here. We have to show overwhelming, undeniable evidence in order to move this thing forward. And if we can't, then we should not. But if we do, then we ought to use every tool in the toolbox to make sure the American people see it for what it is, and we can hold everyone accountable.
Well, about that, what do you say to Americans who increasingly believe no one is going to be held accountable when things happen, when there are all these congressional investigations? They say at the end of the day, nobody actually gets, whether it's a slap on the wrist, time in jail, whatever it would be for the corresponding allegations. What do you say to them?
Oh, and it's the truth. I mean, I sat in the chair of a committee that I chair on oversight on Wednesday. I cursed out the witness that day because they didn't come with information. They refused to answer any of our questions. And then they laughed at us as we were probing about $400 billion that was wasted by the federal government. And so we have these bureaucrats, we have people that come before us and testify, and nothing ever happens. Nobody ever gets fired. No one is ever held accountable. And the government goes on being, in some ways, very corrupt, or at least not transparent with the American people, wasting billions of taxpayer dollars, and it's wrong. And I'm one person. I'm doing what I can to show the truth and show what's happening at every level, at every stage, and I call out both sides of the aisle. I call it straight down the middle, but it's not easy.
Well, and this week, one of the things you were calling for is more transparency with regard to what we used to call UFOs. I know they have a fancy new name. I want to play a little bit of back and forth from the hearing. You have witnesses who say the government has remains of crashes, and that's not all. Here's a bit of that.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
Okay, some serious allegations that raised a lot of eyebrows. Do you believe them? And do you think the government has an obligation to be transparent with all of this information, whatever it may be?
Well, the Oversight Committee on Wednesday, we had 3 very credible witnesses, a former intelligence officer, a retired military, retired pilots who'd seen things they could not explain. And what we learned on Wednesday, because this really isn't about little green men, this is about the federal government laundering your tax dollars, paying for programs that none of us in Congress are aware of, let alone you, the taxpayer. And you have the right to know what's really going on. And we left with more questions than answers because a lot of the information that was shared can't be shared in a public setting. So a lot of it might have to, at the next hearing, be in a private setting in a SCIF, which is frustrating. But I want to be transparent with the American people with everything that we learn from these hearings.
Yes, please do. Okay, you mentioned the issue of abortion. We've talked about this. You don't think the GOP is handling this well. You describe yourself as pro-life, but you were clearly frustrated over a recent measure on the Hill in which it disallowed funding for paid time off or travel expenses for women in the military who travel to get abortions. You did ultimately vote for it, but here's how one pro-life leader reacted. Said this: Nancy Mace is a disgrace to Republican women. Our military exists to protect American lives. We shouldn't be giving them taxpayer funding for abortions to take them. So you voted for the provision, but do you think the government should be backing those expenses?
Well, I am pro-life. My voting record will reflect that. But I also don't believe it's okay at this time, this recently post-Roe, to target women in uniform. That's wrong. It looks bad. And the other thing is, every time we do an abortion vote, and I'm pro-life, we should also be having a vote on bills and legislation and amendments that showcase that we care about women. What are we doing to help women who've been raped or girls who are victims of incest? What are we doing to improve the foster care system for the children who are unwanted when they're born? How are we ensuring that women have the option of adoption versus abortion when making really tough decisions? Are we giving counseling to women who've had abortions? Because a lot of women have very difficult times recovering mentally, making that decision afterwards. They regret it. And so what are we doing to show that we care about women and finding that middle ground? You know, we can take those votes, but we haven't done anything in 7 months in this legislative session to show that we care about women. And that's where my frustration is. And that's where comments like that really don't read the room about what suburban moms and women really care about in this country today. It's the #2 issue in swing districts and swing seats. And if you want to win the White House, if you want to keep the majority in the House and you want to flip the Senate, then we've got to be a lot smarter in how we talk about women and how we show them that we care.
All right, Congressman, we're out of time. I know you're disappointed you don't get to talk about the prayer breakfast again, but maybe next time.
I'll talk about anything, but I'm on my way to church. We're on our way to church right now, Shannon.
Have a great Sunday. Thanks for stopping in here first.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.